Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call 0345 6060 973.
8 minutes before 8 is the time. We'll come back to more of your calls about the situation in Afghanistan. Mohammed, you will be the next caller. I understand you have relatives and you're in fear of their safety, and I want to hear from you. But let's get a more broader picture, more general sense of what's happening from Conservative MP, Armed Forces Minister James Heappey, who joins me now. In the light of this UN report that's been made public overnight, how will this alter or change what the UK forces and other personnel are seeking to do at Kabul airport? Good morning.
Well, good morning, Nick. I think that there is limited room for manoeuvre, frankly, in terms of how we could do things differently to the way that we are at the moment. We are at the airport, securing the airport and facilitating an extraction process. In the last 24 hours, 963 people have been evacuated from Kabul. That's a significant acceleration on the 24-hour period beforehand. And we have every expectation of being able to maintain those sorts of volumes in the days ahead.
It's worth noting you're a former military man yourself. How would it hit you if you weren't able to get everyone out who helped UK forces, Mr. Heappey?
It would hit me hard. It would make me feel sick. I would feel like we had left a job half done. But that's what motivates me to make sure that that isn't the case. And I can tell you that it's not just ex-military people around government who are so motivated. Every single person, from the Prime Minister to Secretaries of State to my junior ministerial colleagues throughout the civil service, down to the most junior private soldier on the ground, are working every second of every day to make sure that we get as many people out as we can in the time that we have.
Well, may the Lord, to whomever you pray, give you as many days as we possibly can. How long, realistically, do you and your colleagues think you've got? The end of the month?
I think that is the date that has been widely circulated, but we don't assume anything given how dynamic the situation is, and therefore every moment of every day counts. It could go on for another 2 days, it could go on for another 5, it could go on for another 10. That's why the process is accelerating, and we're pleased with that. But it's also important to say, Nick, if I may, because I think people will despair of the fact that eventually the air bridge will close, that isn't the end of people's opportunity to be resettled into the United Kingdom. What we will then move to a second phase of the operation, where embassies and high commissions in the wider region in South Asia will be somewhere where people can go to register as part of the resettlement scheme, and they can be moved to the UK that way.
That's presumably, Minister, if the Taliban permit that.
Of course.
So we don't know that will actually happen.
I think there's lots that we don't know about the situation right now, and that's why we're working hard to get as many people out in the situation as it currently is, where actually the Taliban are letting people through to the airport. They are letting people through their checkpoints, where you've heard stories of people being turned away. My understanding is that is more from the Taliban being officious rather than malicious. But clearly, every time we do hear stories about people being turned away, our commanders on the ground have a conversation with the Taliban to try to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Mr. Heappey, you're brave enough to have served there. You served in Kabul, you served in Helmand province. It could be you leave blokes behind who helped you, translators, drivers.
As the Secretary of State had to admit the other morning, and it hurts every single one of us here in the MOD, that is a possibility, but that's what keeps us awake at night. That's what motivates us and every single member of the armed forces, the border force and the consular team forward to make sure that that is the smallest number of people possible.
Do you see the Taliban as friends or enemies, Mr. Heappey?
12 years ago, I was in Sangin and I saw them as the most bitter of enemies. And that was one of the hardest 6 months of my life, in which I saw things that I never want to have to see again and that I'll never be able to forget. But at least I came home with all of my limbs and my life. The reality, however, is that anybody who serves knows that peace is imperfect. I served in Northern Ireland, and I know that Gerry Adams and Martin McGuinness, who had been part of the Provisional IRA, became part of the government in the peace deal. I served in Northern Ireland. I served in Iraq. And Muqtada al-Sadr, who led the Mahdi army that we were fighting in Basra in 2007, is now the key power broker behind the government in Baghdad, with whom we work every single day. And I know deep down that the Taliban were always going to be part of the solution in Afghanistan. And frankly, I think that me, like many other veterans, will have reconciled themselves to that, even if, of course, it hurts when the time comes.
Very powerful testimony. Thank you for that. There are a couple of other headlines I have to put to you. You'll be aware that we had been told that while Dominic Raab was unable to make a call to effectively his Afghan counterpart last week, a junior minister in his department made the call. That would appear now not to be the case. We were also told that planes were as full as they possibly could as they departed Kabul. You may be aware of an image that's been tweeted by the wife of a former Marine commando, Paul Penn Farthing, his Norwegian-born wife, on an aircraft that's virtually empty. I'm sorry to challenge you like this, but because you seem a very decent bloke, but Mr. Heappey, why on earth should my listeners believe a word your government says?
Well, two questions. The second one requires quite a technical answer, which I'll get to in a second, if I may, Nick. But on the phone calls that were or were not made, I don't have the detail of ministerial call lists, but what I can tell you is that no one phone call at the back end of last week would have changed either the trajectory of the collapse.
I hear you, sir, but it shouldn't be made known that a junior colleague made the call. Respectfully, no call was made. That's a very different take, is it not?
Well, look, I mean, I think that it's perfectly reasonable that the media would ask those questions and would seek recrimination. But
I'm not seeking recrimination, sir. Honestly, I'm seeking. All I want is the truth. It's not for me to seek recriminations. I'm after the truth.
I'll do my best to answer your question as I see it, which is that A, I don't have the detail of those call sheets. I am, however, certain from everything that I see in this job here in the MOD that no one phone call would have made a difference at that point, either to the trajectory of the collapse of the government of Afghanistan, nor the speed at which we've been able to put the evacuation plan into place, because there are some military physics around how quickly aircraft and troops were able to flow forwards. Now, on your other question, and it's an important one about empty seats on flights. No RAF plane has left Kabul empty, although unfortunately for other nations, there have been empty planes leaving. Takeoff and landing slots are at a premium. So too is space on the ground at Kabul International Airport. And so no one country can leave their plane on the ground until it's completely full, because in doing that, they deny space on the ground to other countries, bringing in other planes. And so what matters is that we've got 9 RAF planes flying in constant rotation between the United Arab Emirates and Kabul. And the way that we generate the volume is by having regular flights that scoop up everybody who is ready to leave at the moment that the plane is on the ground, and then we get out of Kabul so that other countries have the opportunity to get their planes in. Well, I know that it doesn't look great, but in reality, we're accelerating the process very quickly. 1,000 people out yesterday is no mean feat. We'll maintain that over the days ahead, but it's important that people see this as part of a big, complex international effort. And I think the RAF are doing an amazing job of making it all happen.
Well, hear to that. And you're right, this particular aircraft, I understand, was a German aircraft. So you can say that the best efforts of the men and women on the ground, that would never happen to a British aircraft. Every possible seat that could be filled would be filled.
Well, yes, but equally, we wouldn't be so selfish as to leave our plane on the ground in order to create the optics of a full flight when there's an Italian plane circling over Kabul waiting for that parking spot at the airport. So this is a big international effort. The frequency of our flights is what allows us to generate the volume, not needing to fill every single seat on every single flight.
OK, last couple of headlines. How safe is Dominic Raab in his job, would you say, Minister?
That's not a judgment for me. He has been very, very effective in what he's been doing over the last week. I know that he has been in very regular conversation with my Secretary of State, Ben Wallace, and with the Home Secretary, and the three of them have been driving this at their level, just as I've been working very closely with Tariq Ahmed, the South Asian Minister, and Kevin Foster, the Immigration Minister, at my level, so that we can firefight, problem solve, and make sure that if you are the young paratrooper, the border force official, or the consular staff forward, every single piece of policy friction that could be in place because of Whitehall is removed so that you can do the job as quickly and as efficiently as possible, and we can get as many people out in the time that we have. Lastly,
I'm going to take a punt here, but I think possibly the military is a key part of your life. I reckon the tie you're wearing could be military colours. Am I right? I'm probably wrong, but I sense it might be.
No, it is. It's the tie of the Rifles, and that was the regiment in which I proudly served. And my regiment feels everything that happens in Afghanistan very acutely. We were on the front line in Sangin in some of the most difficult parts of the British operation there. My own battle group had 35 killed and 200 flown home injured in the summer of 2009. I'll never forget what happened there, but if you'll indulge, Nick, I do want to use this as an opportunity to speak to veterans who might be listening, because people like me who are politicians will be held to account for what happens in Afghanistan over the years ahead. But absolutely nothing that is happening in Afghanistan right now detracts from how people should feel about their tour. When they were there, in my case in 2009 or wherever, they were there to do the best job that they possibly could within their unit in the 6 months that they had. And every single one of them did something that was quite remarkable, and they deserve to hold their head up high, because nothing that is happening right now diminishes that extraordinary achievement and the sacrifice of those who served in Helmand over those difficult years.
Well said, Mr. Heappey. Privilege speaking with you. Look after yourself. Thank you. James Heappey, Armed Forces Minister, appearing here on LBC. We're at 2 minutes after 8. News is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, there are fresh concerns for the safety of people